But we begin with the government that has confirmed there will be no reduction in special needs assistance in schools next year, following a major public backlash over proposed cuts affecting almost 200 schools nationwide, including here in Clare. An additional €19 million has been allocated, but questions remain about how the situation arose and what happens when a fresh review of SNA posts take place next year. Meanwhile, SNAs and parents of children with additional needs will protest outside the Dáil at 5 this evening, with simultaneous demonstrations in Limerick, Cork, Galway and Buncrana. They're going ahead with their planned protest despite the government's U-turn on SNA allocations. Joining us this morning to discuss all of this are the Meelick Fianna Fáil TD and Chair of the Oireachtas Committee on Education and Youth, Cathal Crowe, and the Shannon Sinn Féin TD, Donna McGettigan and Cathal and Donna. You're both very welcome to the show this morning. Cathal, the announcement there'll be no reduction in SNAs next year and an additional €19 million in funding will be welcome, but hasn't the way in which this has come about been a total mess?
Yeah, good morning, Alan and Donna. Look, I'm not happy at all about the last couple of weeks here. I'm a teacher by profession. I was an SNA at one stage as well, and someone quite close to me has benefited really well over the years from how well special education is set up in Ireland. Look, we're being told repeatedly that there's a huge focus here on special education, but what I heard across the last fortnight didn't sit congruently with that. There were schools right throughout the county losing their SNAs. On Monday, I visited 4 or 5 of those schools, and I travelled home from Dublin last night as well to meet another school. Parents up in arms, SNAs fearing about their job futures. The announcement this week has been very positive. Funding is secured and jobs are secure for 2026-27. But I think we need a little bit more than that. And as chairman of the Oireachtas Committee, I've been in correspondence yesterday with both the Senior Minister in Education. We're trying to summons before the committee next week. There's a really important circular that was brought out in 2014 that set out the terms of SNAs. I think that needs to be overhauled. I've been looking for that in the Dáil, and I have a commitment from the Minister that now is going to be reviewed. That is so central to everything we're talking about here.
Yeah, and just for people who mightn't be aware, that circular of 12 years ago, that significantly narrowed the role of SNAs to personal care rather than educational support. And how much damage do you believe that circular has done over the past decade or more?
Well, I remember I was in the classroom that year when that circular was issued, and overnight basically it redefined what SNAs were about and who they could help. In reality, I think most schools still would be allowing SNAs to work alongside children who have other care needs, who have cognitive impairments, who might have emotional behavioural issues. I think an SNA can take on a broad range of issues. They're so capable, so caring, and they should be so valued. But to just define it as primary care needs, I think simply isn't realistic. So I'm glad that I raised that at the Dáil last week with the Taoiseach, and I'm glad that I've gotten a commitment that it's going to be reviewed. Our committee will have a central role in that, and yesterday I was at a meeting with Donna and others where we met with force representing the SNAs. So there's a lot of work to be done, but I think overhauling that circular is so key to everything we now need to do.
Okay, Donna, to bring you in, do you see this reversal as a victory for opposition pressure and grassroots campaigning?
No, I don't, and the fact that the protests are still going on shows that this is not a victory, and it should not be about a victory for opposition or anything. This should be, the core issue here at the minute is the way that applying that circular in a manner that it effectively strips SNA support from autistic and neurodivergent children on the basis of their needs, which really means that they're favoured less. These children are favoured less when it comes into the classroom setting. And the role of the SNA, it helps the whole class. It doesn't just help the child in need, and I'm sure Cathal will agree with that. And when we met the SNAs yesterday and parents and that, they don't feel this as a win or a victory. They feel this as another step in their protest in order to get this clarified. And as Cathal says, that whole circular needs to be overhauled. The NCSE is acting as an unaccountable gatekeeper, educational support operating without transparency. And then you have the last night in the Dáil, there was no apology from the government side on this. No apology. There was SNAs and teachers sitting up in the gallery. No apology to them, to the hurt they caused. There was almost like this didn't happen. Whereas we know of the 584 schools who received the outcome of the reviews, 194 are facing the devastating cuts to their SNA. Now, we know this is okay for 2026, 2027, but SNAs are saying that every year they go through job insecurity, and that needs to be resolved.
As you say, no apology. And look, even Cathal has admitted that the way this has been handled has been a bit of a disaster, to say the least. And obviously question marks remain over whether this is just a reprieve rather than we need something more long-term going forward. But can you at least acknowledge the government are listening? It was handled badly, but they know they made a mistake. They've made this U-turn. They've at least announced there'll be no reduction for the next year, additional funding, that there is some sort of acknowledgement of the concerns that are out there, some level of contrition.
Yes, they have made a U-turn on this, but it's still not guaranteed for the next few years. And, there's, as Cathal said, that whole circular has to be overhauled. There's no guarantee that that's going to happen. Like, Cathal will work in the committee on that, and that'll be a cross-party thing where that has to be looked at. But the fact that, you say that they admitted they did wrong, if they did, they would have apologised for the hurt and the anger that they caused, and they haven't. And, this is something, and the fact that the protests are still going ahead, yes, they've admitted, but it's only because of the backlash. It's not because they suddenly have a change of heart.
Cathal, that lack of engagement and prior consultation on the announcement of the review. We were joined by parents and SNAs last week, and they really emphasised that point. And I know the school's not happy either, all unnecessarily worried, the sword of Damocles hanging over their heads and their children's heads. Many parents only learned of the potential cuts through letters or social media. Does this controversy point to a serious failure in communication from the department or indeed the NCSE? And if so, how can all of them be assured that failure in communication will be resolved going forward?
Yeah, well, the irony is there was quite extensive consultation. This is the irony of the whole thing. So any school that received correspondence in the past fortnight to say they were losing SNAs, they would have received a visit from their local SNA, Special Education Needs Organiser, around December. They would have based themselves in the school for the day. They would have read through files, recommendations. So that's what's really astounding, that on the basis of having seen firsthand what's happening in the classroom, on the basis of tranches of paperwork put in front of them, that some of the decisions were to actually cut SNA support. I know of schools who were expecting to receive an increase in their SNA support. There's a very other critical point here as well, Alan, if I could just mention, and I've mentioned this before in the Dáil as well, that we have a scenario whereby neither Donna nor I are this morning telling you how to do our job, because we're not qualified in the sphere of media. I wouldn't go into a surgical theatre and tell someone performing an operation how to do their job, or I wouldn't override them. But what's happening repeatedly with special education is we have SNAs, these special education needs organisers. They're fine people and they are qualified, but they are overriding. Sorry, I'm on the train.
That's okay.
You can hear him.
Hopefully that's not your stop coming up soon, Cathal. We need you for another while yet.
If I just to finish. No. Sorry about the background noise. To finish the point, the point being here that we're repeatedly having special education needs organisers overriding educational psychologists. That cannot happen. Legally, that cannot happen. And I've sat with several parents and school principals on Monday afternoon on that very point. You cannot override a recommendation of a psychologist, but that is repeatedly happening. Some parents are equipped to go and fight that and fight a battle. Other parents are not, and that's simply wrong.
We'll go to Donna now, and hopefully the announcements will end soon on the train. Cathal, just the sequencing of events, Donna, from your perspective. The Taoiseach says the government didn't sign off at cabinet level on the SNA allocation review. Seems like there's a serious breakdown in oversight. The Minister for Education, Hildegard Naughton, saying she wasn't happy with the sequencing of events, which makes it sound like she wasn't as fully across it as perhaps you would expect her to be. From your perspective, your party's perspective, is this simply a communications failure or something more systemic? And if it is more systemic, does that raise concerns over how the government is going to handle this going forward, and that again in 12 months' time we could have a similar debacle?
Well, this is why we need to have the security of this now. We don't need to sit here in another year and having to go back through all this again. And even the hurt, like a lot of the SNAs and parents particularly were very hurt when Micheál Martin came out and said, "I'll just appeal." So he said that back, was it 2 weeks? I mean, there was a whole 2 weeks in between where there was no confirmation coming from government on this. There was no we're going to stop this, we're going to look at this, we're going to look into how this even came about. I mean, even the very fact that they contemplated cutting this vital service in the first place, that tells families everything they need to know about where the vulnerable children sit in their ranks. And these are the questions that people are asking. What happened in these 2 weeks that it was left where the hurt and anger was caused and it was left to fester and nobody was coming out to say, look, this is wrong, we realise this is wrong, there's a lack of communication, or we didn't sign off on this. None of that happened. So, it just shows you that there can't be, and this is why they can't rely on the government to sit next year and say this isn't going to happen again. It has to be sorted now, and hopefully, as Cathal says in the committee, that will happen.
Cathal, how would you respond to the criticism that there was a breakdown in oversight, that admission from Micheál Martin and Hildegard Naughton, saying she was not happy with the sequencing of events, and it sounds like I'm sure she's more than not happy. The breakdown in oversight, serious concerns.
Yeah, well, I put down a question for this week in the Dáil because the whole thing just doesn't sit right. Again, we're talking individual cases, so it is a fact that when an individual case of an SNA gets struck out, you do have to appeal. That's just a fact, and the overall issue has been dealt with for now, but there's a lot more to be done. The point I'm making is that I'm wondering, within the National Council for Special Education, was there some internal communique suggesting that there would be a certain cutting of posts across certain areas or not? I'm hearing there's going to be 1,700 new posts for September 2026, but that doesn't sit with the analytics of the past fortnight, where we've had quite a number of posts lost or uncertain throughout Clare. On Monday and again last night, I suppose took off the political hat and put on the teacher hat, and I went in and helped a number of schools with their appeal process. Several of them still continue to put in appeals, even though the issue for now has gone away. And I think it's a good thing that they've done that, because the new school year will come around again before we know it, and I think SNAs in particular, but also the parents and the children that they're supporting, want full certainty going forward here that these supports will be there and won't be pulled. One SNA put it really well to me the other day. She said she has never heard someone say at the school gate, there are too many SNAs in the school. Quite the opposite. And I would love to see us get to a model where that notorious circular becomes a thing of the past, and that it's just a given that every class would have someone in the room assisting all children, those with profound needs and those with cognitive impairments, those who might have emotional behaviour problems. I think we need to get to that model. Other countries have, and eventually I hope we will too.
I just wonder, Cathal, has, or indeed going forward, will this saga cause friction between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, given it is a Fine Gael minister, Minister Naughton, involved here, albeit she seems to be trying to distance herself a bit from it by saying she's not happy with the sequencing of events. But, regardless of the extent of her involvement, she is the minister at the helm.
Yeah, I've never seen the whole thing through that lens in the last few days. I certainly haven't. I do know my own colleague, Michael Mine, has been very available. I've spoken quite a lot over the last few days, and I've brought individual cases of schools to his attention. So, look, things will move on. This has been quite a flashpoint this week. I will go out and meet with protesters this evening. The work on this all-important circular will get underway. I think the unions need to be brought in now quite quickly. Schools can catch a breath, I think, but this won't go away unless we bring future certainty to it. I think that's what we now need to do.
Donna, your spokesperson, Donna O'Rourke, saying the government's actions showed a lack of respect for SNAs and families. What accountability do you believe is required now?
Well, we need to account for the fact that what happens in the classroom is SNAs need to be really, really valued, because they help the whole class. If a child is having a severe episode, the SNA is there to help that, and that then helps the whole classroom. So, we need to value SNAs, but see where we're seeing a shortage of special class places, and schools are telling us that they've been told you have to put in a special class, and they're going, where? There's no infrastructure to help them with this, and so there's a whole uncertainty about the whole infrastructure and even special classes. So this whole issue needs to be looked at. The child needs to be looked at as a holistic, not just as a certain needs issue. And And the circular just needs to be taken out of, completely overhauled or taken out.
Okay, and in terms of being more specific, because of course it is easier in your position to point from across the Dáil at the government at what they've gotten wrong, but if Sinn Féin were in government, what immediate changes would you implement to create what campaigners are called a fully inclusive education system?
So you need to provide long overdue clarity on this, but you need to, as I say, abandon the disastrous 2025-26 and the SNA review. You need to commit to a root and branch review and replace the outdated circular, which I've already said. But we need to implement a fair and transparent SNA redeployment scheme to provide job security for existing SNAs and take immediate steps to significantly increase the number of SNA posts, because, as Cathal said, they're saying there just isn't enough out there. And then to guarantee that no future changes to SNA provision will be made without meaningful, constructive and transparent engagement with schools, parents and SNAs themselves. So these are all just some of the things that need to be put in place.
Just to finish with you, Cathal, parents and SNAs told us last week in Morning Focus that it's actually more, not less SNAs needed due to more children with increasingly complex needs. What assurances can you give them this is what will happen beyond the next 12 months?
Yeah, well, I would agree with loads of what Donna has said, but I would respectfully disagree. I think huge inroads have been made in terms of providing special classes through Clare. There's a lot more to be done, but I've visited some of those. I visit them every week, and there's, nowadays children can be educated mostly in their local community. It's not a perfect model, but it's vastly improved on years ago. There'll be 1,700 new SNAs in September. Now, there's a caveat. I wait to hear what schools will get those. We don't have all that detail yet. But really, I think we need to, as someone who's worked for years in education and are now leading out the committee in the Dáil in education, I would like to see a valued space for special schools. I think we have, of course, tried to mainstream as best we can. We want children to be educated in their community, but not every child can attend their local school. We need to value special education. Special needs assistants need to have their roles redefined. They need job security. I'm very much in their corner, and I will be, again, by the end of this week, meeting more SNAs and more schools, and I'll meet some of them at the protest today. So look, the work on the committee that I lead is continuous. We're meeting again today on a whole range of issues. We're meeting twice, actually, and we very much will be working hands-on on the SNA issue and bringing lived experiences from Clare into that room and ensuring that the outcomes are positive.
Okay, we do have to leave it there, but my thanks to both of you, Donna McGettigan, the Shannon Sinn Féin TD, and the Meelick Fianna Fáil TD and Chair of the Oireachtas Committee on Education and Youth, battling the train announcements there. Cathal Crowe with us on Morning Focus.